Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Vetus Luke's Old Light Rekindled. Today, I want to talk to you about a topic that's been rolling around in my head for a little while, and it's only until recently that I've had the words that I wanted to put my thoughts out there for you all. So, this all began when I started realizing that I was drawn more and more towards old films. I have not watched very many new films lately, and anything that I tend to gravitate towards rewatching is something that was most likely shot on film before, the age of digital movie making. There's something about digital shows or newer technology being used to make shows that makes them feel cold to me, and I find myself wanting to watch these older films, even if the quality is less than stellar as far as, the visuals and the sound and the effects, because there's some kind of texture and comfort and warmth to these kinds of shows that I am finding myself really drawn towards. It's almost like I have digital art fatigue at the moment, and I couldn't really explain why. Not only that, I'm finding myself less and less interested in the latest and greatest as far as digital photography goes. I have been shooting digital photography since, 2010. So when I first started learning photography, I did not use film. I used a digital SLR camera. That was all I knew. And for a while, I was always enamored with the newest technology and wanting to improve my kit, get better cameras, better image quality, higher resolution, more megapixels. I was there for it. Well, right now I'm facing the need of potentially replacing my camera. I currently shoot a Fujifilm X-T3, and I love this camera body system because of the aesthetic to it. There's a film quality to the files that any other big name camera brand doesn't quite capture. But it's still a digital file. It's still an amazing file. You can get very, very good quality image resolution from my X-T3. Well, it's starting to potentially go out. I might be looking at having to replace that camera, but without getting into all those boring details, there was a part of me that was really sad. I didn't want to have to buy the newest camera. Now they have a Fujifilm X-T5, and it has incredible image creation capabilities, incredible resolution. It makes, beautiful photos, professional quality images. But for some reason, for the first time in my photography career, I did not want to buy the newest camera. I'm actually interested in buying one of Fujifilm's much older digital cameras because there's a certain character that older cameras, even digital cameras, have that some of the newer ones don't. The imperfections give it a kind of texture and warmth like watching these older films gives. It's the imperfections that kind of give it its charm. And by imperfections, I don't want to confuse you into thinking that I think bad art is more attractive than good art. I don't want to spend too much time philosophizing on what is good art, what is bad art. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the episode. But what I mean by imperfections, a piece of art can be beautiful and good and well executed and follow the rules of design. You can have a photograph that is in focus. The composition can just be right on point. But the imperfections come from the limitations of the medium that you're using. So in the case of film photography or in older cameras, there's more texture to the image. There's more grain. There's more image distortion, perhaps. There's, a certain kind of rendition of color that comes from, certain film stocks or older camera models. That's what I mean by imperfections. So you can have a beautiful photograph that's a classic instant work of art that, is going to, be worthy of being hung in a gallery or something like that. And there'd be imperfections to it because of the medium that was used. The same is going to be true for any kind of, work of art. There are going to be quote unquote mistakes or things that are not, completely uniform and perfect. Essentially, if you use a machine to create something, you can get something really precise, predictable, and, calculated in such a way that there are no mistakes, that there are no imperfections. Whereas anything made by humans, anything, made by hand, there are going to be some naturally embedded imperfections that actually give character to the final work of art. Now, as I was thinking about all these different things and feeling sad about having to potentially replace my beloved camera, I stumbled across some YouTube videos from one of my favorite YouTubers when it comes to, learning photography. At least he was, back in the day. I haven't watched his channel quite as consistently lately because of diverging interests, but his name is Peter McKinnon. He's a titan when it comes to the world of digital photography and content creation, especially on YouTube. And he's recently been diving into the world of film. And he's been documenting that and sharing his experience of it. And it's been really refreshing to watch. Seeing this guy, this celebrity who's built his, photographic empire on the latest and greatest technology that companies like Canon or, Nikon or wherever have to offer, now suddenly gravitating towards creation of images that are less than perfect, that don't have just this pristine cleanness to the files. He recently dropped a video that was, I believe it was titled, I can put a link in the description below, but it was something along the lines of, I want to make more vlogs like this. And what the video was an old-fashioned vlog of a photographic trip that he took with some of his buddies. And it was shot in the old style of, handheld, shaky footage, less than, professional cinematography. But it was real. There was a realness to it and a nostalgia to it that you don't get anymore in a lot of content creators. I can think of a number of channels that I follow as just, channels that I want to watch to chill out. And I've, followed some of these people for, a couple of years, maybe even more. And I've seen the progression, of their production quality. They're very skillful content creators, and their skills have continued to grow. And with the accessibility of more and more digital technology being put into the hands of ordinary people like you and I, we can make cinematic quality content without having a full crew, without having, commercial grade equipment. But I've noticed, along with, my loss of interest in, more modern films, I've also noticed myself being bored with content creators whose content has gotten better and better, quote, better and better over time. It seems more orchestrated, seems less real, and I'm not accusing these people of being disingenuous. I don't think that they are, at least not in every case. I think it's just simply the more that we clean up our art and the more that machines are involved in creating our art, there's a loss of humanness to our art. And I'm going to get into that more in a second. But anyway, so all these thoughts, all these conflicts have been rolling around in my mind. And I was reminded of an essay titled, let me pull up the title here so I can get it for you exactly. I always get it wrong, but the title of the essay, it's an old essay. I believe it was written in 1935. It's titled The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. So what's interesting about this is that this was before the era of digital. This was before the era of computers. What this essay was responding to was the advent of films, of movies, even, photographic art, because this is when those, medias, those kinds of art were really starting to coalesce and become, an established field within the art community, an established genre within the realm of art. And the author is responding to that, critiquing this, raising questions, asking questions, trying to answer them. And it's a really interesting essay. The author is Walter Benjamin. And after reading that essay, I've got a lot of thoughts swirling around in my head. So I thought I would just share them with you. And as I do so, intersperse it with some quotes from the essay itself. I think I'll start off with a quote that Benjamin himself includes at the very beginning of his essay. It's from Paul Valéry. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I could be butchering that name. It's a French writer. And he says, "Our fine arts were developed, their types and uses were established, in times very different from the present, by men whose power of action upon things was insignificant, in comparison with ours. But the amazing growth of our techniques, the adaptability and precision that they have attained, the ideas and habits they are creating, make it a certainty that profound changes are impending in the ancient craft of the beautiful. In all the arts, there is a physical component which can no longer be considered or treated as it used to be, which cannot remain unaffected by our modern knowledge and power. For the last 20 years, neither matter nor space nor time has been what it was from time immemorial. We must expect great innovations to transform the entire technique of the arts, thereby affecting artistic invention itself, and perhaps even bringing about an amazing change in our very notion of art. That quote, when I first read it, kind of gave me chills because this essay was written in 1935. I'm not sure when the quote was originally written, but it was so prophetic. I mean, if this author, I don't know if this author is alive today, but if he could see where art has gone, where our ability to, gain precision and adaptability, our power over the elements, our power of action upon the raw elements that we use to create, seeing that increase, I think he would be blown away by the accuracy of his predictions. We are living in a time when, I'm drinking my coffee. We are living in a time when, because of machines, because of technology, we have gained greater power over the raw materials with which we use to create things. And it's changing our art. It's changing the way we experience art too. It's not just affecting how we create art and expanding how we define what an artwork is, but we're actually, I think, losing something in the process. So one of the main points in the essay is that now that we live in an age when we can mechanically reproduce artworks, meaning, make copies, make scans, stream, pieces of artwork, art has lost an aura. Art has lost its aura. To add to that, I would say art has lost its soul. What does that even mean? Well, in the essay, Benjamin defines aura as an artwork's unique presence in time and space. Another way you can think of that is that this is so let's say we have a painting by Van Gogh. The original artwork has a unique presence in time and space. It exists at a specific time and in a specific place, the original does. But now that we can, digitally reproduce artworks, we are able to experience Van Gogh's art at anywhere we wish. Any place I am, I can Google an image of, a painting and see the picture of the original. But there's a sense in which the original has now lost its aura, its draw, because now I've actually seen a copy of it. I've seen an exact image of it, an exact copy, a scan, a photograph of it, but I haven't experienced the original's aura, the original's unique instantiation. Traditionally, a piece of artwork, because it had a unique instantiation that could not be easily or if at all reproduced, there was a time in which, I could take a picture of the Mona Lisa, but it wouldn't look the same as it does in real life. I can actually make a photograph now that actually looks better than the original. I can edit it, I can improve upon it, and make it even better than the original. Before, that wasn't even possible. So before that was possible, a piece of art, its, aura not only came from the fact that it was this, unique, singular piece of existence, it also had an embedded history, an embedded identity to it based on, who had owned it, where it had been, the history that it had been through, the history of the piece, the history of ownership, the history of its locations. It almost gives art this cultish, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but it makes it kind of a religious, sacred thing, something to be appreciated, something to be experienced, savored, that now that we can mechanically reproduce things, few of us experience that or even see the value in that. Most of us would probably be satisfied with just seeing a high-res photograph of the Mona Lisa and move on and never feel the need to actually experience this, the aura of it, its instantiation of it. So I think we can sum up this point by just simply saying that because of the advent of the digital and the mechanization of art, now that we can replicate artworks, we're not only detaching an artwork, the image, we're detaching the image from its tradition, from its very identity, from what makes it what it is. But we are also lessening the value of the authentic. So related to this idea is this next point that I had, hearing Walter Benjamin talk about the cultish aspect of art made me think of this. So in losing its aura, art is also losing its contextualization, its context within ritual in our culture and in religion. The experience of works of art, philosophers and, artists used to describe art, the artistic experience, as something called the experience of the sublime. It was an experience that was described as having a quality of a deeply moving, paradigm shifting, out of body kind of experience of God. And art was traditionally seen as a similar kind of experience, the aesthetic experience. When you experience beauty incarnated in a piece of art, it can generate the same kind of experience you might have of God in a religious ritual, such as a sacrament. But instead, if we just merely enjoy the copy of it, we're no longer getting in touch with that aura of the piece of art, and therefore are, no longer enjoying that cultural ritual, that cultural identity of, being moved by a piece of artwork that has history, that has context. I remember going to Washington, D.C. several years ago and getting to see some original paintings by Mary Cassatt. As a child, I had done an art curriculum where I'd learned about Mary Cassatt. I had studied her paintings. We had looked at her paintings, pictures of her paintings, studied her techniques, even tried to, emulate her technique. But I remember when I actually got to stand in front of these pieces that I had seen before, it was such a deeply moving experience to see something that someone's hands had made, to see the brushstrokes up close and know that this piece has existed throughout history. This thing was created by an artist and has lasted through time and has taken on cultural significance. And it's this particular piece, not the pictures of the painting itself, but it's the painting itself that has that identity. It's hard to describe the feeling unless you've actually experienced something like this yourself. A similar, more modern instance of this phenomenon can be seen in the cultish-like response to Taylor Swift's recent conference tour. People describe that experience as if it were like a religious experience, hearing her live. There's a kind of amnesia that people are coming out of that experience with, because the emotional high and the emotional pitch with which, they experienced that moment, it was like a religious experience that fans did not get just from simply listening to her albums, simply listening to mechanically made reproductions of Taylor Swift's songs. Hearing her live and in person was what gave it that aura. So why does this happen? Why is the aura lost? You would think that if we have an identical copy that sounds exactly like the original, maybe it's even better than the original. If you have a performance, live and on stage, you've probably noticed a difference in the quality of the performer's voice. When you hear it in a recording, everything's cleaned up and perfect. Takes are redone, edits are made, background noise is removed. Basically, a digitally cleaned up, polished version of Taylor Swift's voice, of her singing, versus actually hearing her in person. It's not as perfect. I would guarantee that she makes mistakes probably as she's singing, but I think if you were to ask the concert goers, they would probably enjoy that more. They would think that her performance and her live performance was better than the artificially constructed perfect version of her performance. This is because the more that we use machines in making art, the less of our humanity is going to be present in the art that we produce. Why is that? Well, the more that we use machines in making our art, the less our humanity is present in it. And in that process, art becomes dehumanized. Less and less, of our fingerprints are reflected upon the artwork. The more that we use digital means mediums to create our art, the less of us is reflected in our art. As a Christian, I believe that we are made in the image of God. And I think that as creative beings, we are reflecting the creative impulses of our Creator. And us being made in the image of God, that humanity of us is reflected in our artwork. As we're creative, as we express ourselves, we are mimicking, we are mirroring our Creator. And we leave our fingerprints. We leave those fingerprints of being made in the image of a Creator. We leave our humanity upon the artwork that we create. However, the more we delegate our creative activities towards machines, we see less and less of ourselves. We see less and less of that fingerprint, of that image of God, that humanity in what's being made, because we're no longer creating it ourselves. A machine is creating it alongside of us or for us even. Instead of being sub-creators, as Tolkien talks about, we are no longer making incarnations of beauty. We have, surrendered our creativity to a machine. And the thing with machines is that they're not creative. Machines only do what we tell them to do. They can merely replicate or, follow commands and follow instructions. They manufacture. They don't create. There's a quote from the essay where Benjamin says, "For the first time in world history, mechanical reproduction emancipates a work of art from its parasitical dependence on ritual. To an ever greater degree, the work of art reproduced becomes the work of art designed for reproducibility." That's kind of a jarring thought. No longer are we creating works of art for art's sake. No longer are we creating works of art to be part of this, history-long ritual of enjoying beauty as a culture, as a people, as a human race. We are now creating art that is designed to be reproduced, is designed to be experienced without that aura. I think it would be helpful to insert an example here of what that actually looks like. Like I said at the beginning of this talk, this essay was written in response to the advent of photography and motion pictures of film. And by film here, I don't mean, rolls of film, although that's what it was used. Here I mean just, movies, the cinema. So if we look at the history of the cinema, it was actually, founded upon first, theatrical performances. First, you had the theater, where you had the live performance of a play. Even though the play could be performed multiple times over and over again, each performance had its own singularity, depending on the cast, who was being cast in each role, emotional presence of the particular actors on a particular night, depending on how they were feeling at the moment. Theatrical performances were also heavily influenced by their audiences. Performers will talk about, those who have performed in theater, talk about how the audience themselves becomes a member of the cast because the performers play off the audience. They're encouraged or discouraged. There's a kind of symbiosis between performer and the viewer in that setting. This gives, the theatrical performance, a unique singularity, even though it can be, performed again. Think of it as a famous artist can paint their same painting again. Each one, would be a copy, but never an exact copy. No two performances were alike. Van Gogh could paint the same painting twice and it still wouldn't be identical. This kind of performance has an aura to it. It has a singularity. It becomes a ritual. Going to the theater, getting to experience that performance becomes a kind of cultural cult. With the advent of motion pictures, now what you have is no longer a singularity. You have the singular performance. You have, the original performance that was filmed on a, film strip. But what you get to see is not the live performance of the actors shooting the film. You get to see a copy of that singularity. And the essay is, responding to this and arguing that this is, a loss of the aura. And to an extent it is. But there's also a sense in which the aura is not completely gone, that I think now we've reached the point that the art is gone. So before I get into that, let's continue the analogy. So with film, you have a very realistic copy. It actually looked more like what we see with the naked eye. You could see imperfections Our ability to insert special effects was incredibly limited. And so what films used to reflect was a very, very close representation of reality, so that it was the next best thing to getting to experience a theatrical performance live. There was a texture to it. There were imperfections because of the film that was being used. The limitations of what we could do technologically, our ability to exert power over, the final product was, still incredibly limited. And then you even still had the sense of the cult aspect of going to see a film before people could, buy DVDs or VHS tapes of a movie. You had to go to the movie theater to go, and watch a film. And oftentimes people would go and see a film once and that was it. This, being able to, watch a show over and over again, or binge watch, or, rewatch a television show. If you wanted to go rewatch the performance, if you wanted to rewatch the film, you had to go back to the theater again and buy another ticket and see it. And so there was still a sense of, that cult aspect, that religious ritual of going to see the film. People would still go get dressed up to go to the movie theater. Like, it was still a part of this. There was still a high culture aspect to it. And like going to see a movie in theaters, there was an aura to it. There was a uniqueness to it. It's not like it was something that, necessarily happened every day. It wasn't like it is today, where you'll have a whole menagerie of films to choose from, and many of them terrible. And it was, oftentimes very limited offerings. And so it was just a few steps removed from, the Shakespearean days of theater. However, now that is not at all the reality in which we live in. Yes, we still go to the movie theater. Yes, we still watch movies. But what's different? With the advent of digital movie making, digital filmmaking, now the power that we could exert over the elements to, create something is now pretty much limitless. We can do pretty much anything we want to do now. The problem with this that I see is that instead of a realistic copy of a singularity, now what actors are doing is they're doing a performance, but it's so chopped up and turned into this Frankenstein process of creating a digital piece of art that's meant to be replicated. It's this hyper-real fabrication that there's no aura to be enjoyed. Like, okay, so if you were to be on the set of a movie being filmed, let's say back in the 50s or 60s, you could be a bystander on set and watch what was going on. Yes, there were sets fabricated, and yes, there were things that were not real. But what you were watching was what was being recorded through the camera. Yeah, from a different angle. You were seeing the performance from a different spot. You could see, the lighting and the microphones and the cameras. But you could look and see, there's John Wayne dressed up like a cowboy, and he's doing his scene, and you're watching the scene, just like you would watch it in a theater. Now, if you were to go on the set of, say, like the Avatar movie, what you would see is people in like these wetsuit-like contraptions with all these like nodes on their faces that will later be then used to create a completely different scene. There is no singularity to be watched. There's no original that has that aura that is then replicated. This might be a graphic analogy, and I'm not saying that digital, films are evil, are inherently evil. But to me, there's an analogy that there's a jarring and a very unsettling analogy between that and pornography. Like, it's not even real. What's being enjoyed, what's sensationalizing us, and what's giving us that buzz is not real in any sense of the word. It's this scandalization of our senses, this, bait and switch, this fabrication of the real. And it's having effects on us that I don't think we actually realize. And I'm going to get into that in my next point. Because what's happening is that no longer do we have a cult or religious-like experience of art. We're no longer experiencing the aura of pieces of artwork. Instead, art is now, we've replaced aura with politics, with utility, with commodity. We're being stimulated, but not in the same ways that we used to be stimulated. And I think that's why I'm finding myself fatigued with digital films. Recently, I was watching the Matrix trilogy again, rewatching it. Such a great set of movies. But there's a line, I believe it's in the first one. It's not exactly the same thing as being talked about, but I can adapt the line to what we're talking about here. So there's a scene in the movie, without giving away any spoilers, where one of the characters who has been awakened, who's been red-pilled to the Matrix, Morpheus, is being tortured by a program within the Matrix named Smith. And Smith is giving Morpheus this history of the Matrix and telling him, how the program was originally designed in such a way that it was a perfect world. But humans rejected it. Humans refused to accept the program. And Smith's explanation was that humans are just hardwired to find our identity in suffering and pain. And setting that, philosophical discussion aside for a moment, it made me think of this whole idea of the dehumanization, the deincarnation of art. I'm finding myself rejecting the program. I'm rejecting this hyper-realistic world, this digital world, because it's there's a dissonance created in my mind. It's uncomfortable to me to watch this. There's something about it that just doesn't seem quite right. There's something about it that seems eerie and that I don't enjoy. I don't enjoy modern films like I do old films. And let's set aside the quality of the story itself for a moment, and let's just purely look at the quality of the medium, okay? If you could set before me a movie shot on film, and then the same movie shot, ultra high def 4K, I'm going to be drawn towards the nostalgia of the film every single time, because there's an aura to it that the digital does not have. The digital is cold. It's too precise. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel tangible and beautiful in a way that the thing shot on film with texture and imperfections and grain has. So yeah, I'm rejecting the Matrix. Okay, so moving to my final point. Well, let me back up for a second. There's a couple of quotes that I want to share with you that have to do with this. So let me see here if I can. Okay, yeah. So here's a quote that's comparing theatrical performance with film performance, movie films, and Benjamin says that for the first time, and this is the effect of film, meaning motion pictures, the aura which on the stage emanates from Macbeth cannot be separated for the spectators from that of the actor. However, the singularity of the shot in the studio is that the camera is being substituted for the public. Consequently, the aura that envelops the actor vanishes, and with it, the aura of the figure he portrays. I love this quote because, again, what we're seeing is that with digital films, with digital movie making, that loss of aura is even starker. Now there is no aura at all to be had originally. Now the aura is just not even created. The aura comes from the actor doing the performance himself. But if he's, if he just becomes a tool for the machine to use to create its own artwork in like the CGI film, now we've reduced the human actor who possesses an aura in and of himself or herself. Now we've reduced them to a mere tool in the hands of a machine who's not creating, who's making pornography, making artistic pornography. I mean, that bothers me. That again, not to say that digital filmmaking is evil, but I'm feeling cheated. I'm feeling like I'm losing something. And I don't really care to see some of these films anymore because I just don't get out of them what I do older films. Now that we are actually making pieces of art that are made to be copied and made to be replicated, we are now turning art into a commodity, something to be consumed. And the more that people consume these kinds of things, the more they want that, appetite to be fed. And so the demand is increasing. And with that, our ability to, meet that demand. Now that we can mass produce, quote unquote, art, Now that we can produce, media to be consumed at a rapid rate, at a, prolific rate, now we're cheapening the quality of our artwork, because it's impossible for everything that's, created to actually be a good piece of artwork, right? And so, like, for example, if you take your digital camera out there and you have the, spray and pray method of just taking as many pictures as you possibly can because your memory card can hold as many pictures, as you would, want to take in the space of an hour, chances are most of the pictures on your memory card at the end of the evening are going to be, crap. You may have like 1 out of 100 images that are actually good. Whereas with film, because you can't just, replicate it like crazy, film is expensive. You can't endlessly shoot a film camera. You have a roll of film that has a certain number of exposures before it has to be replaced with a new roll of film, and each one of those costs. It's not this, endlessly inexhaustible, way of recording images. When you go into shooting knowing that you have a limited number of shots, you're going to be much more careful about the shots that you take. You're not going to just, blindly go out there and just blow your 36 shots. On a digital camera, before I started shooting, film, I would blow through 36 shots in like 5 minutes. Now it takes me a few weeks to shoot through a roll of 36 exposures on film. And it's not that, all of the things that I shoot on film are good, but at least I'm more careful and more choosy, and I don't create as much bad art as I used to. Maybe I don't create more good art, but at least I'm not creating, more garbage that needs to just be thrown out. Applying that to our modern context, I would argue that most of what's being put in front of us as far as media to consume, entertainment to consume, is just trash. It's not even good. Yet we watch it anyway because it's there. We've got this insatiable appetite to be stimulated, and social media is contributing to that. Our streaming, abilities to just have everything we want at our fingertips all the time is creating an appetite for us that, is not being satisfied with good stuff. So, it's now that anybody can create, because the tools are in the hands of, common people, and because everybody wants to consume what we're being fed and what's being put out there, is just, we're not motivated to create quality art. There's no reason to do that, because somebody will watch what you make, whether you post it on social media or, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Machines are making us make more bad art. Okay, so my final point that I want to bring up related to all this is that this ability to replicate art is actually stealing from us our ability to contemplate. We're experiencing a loss of contemplation in art or of art. This is what makes it lose that religious quality and turns it into just mere propaganda. And this is where art has become extremely dangerous. How is this happening? Well, as our ability to replicate art grows more and more, no longer are we, no longer do we have to be intentional about putting art before us or going to experience an artwork. You can sit on your couch 24/7 and be just constantly bombarded by images and media to the point where you are no longer contemplating what you're seeing. Things are just happening to you. You're no longer being immersed in an experience of beauty by going to see a painting in a museum or going to sit through a performance of Macbeth. Now your senses are being overwhelmed by this prolific vomit of images and sounds and experiences. Things are happening to you, and you're no longer an active participant in the moment. Now you're just this passive observer, and things are just inundating your brain, inundating your mind. And this declines your ability to contemplate what you're experiencing. You become just this sponge that absorbs media rather than engaging with the artwork itself, engaging with the aura of the piece. Benjamin quotes an author, I believe his name, I'm looking in my notes here, I think his name is Duhamel, and he says, speaking about film, talking about movies, he says, I can no longer think what I want to think, when watching a film. My thoughts have been replaced by moving images. And I think that statement has only become more and more true. When we watch films, it's a kind of art that has, it's a more passive experience of art. And I think that as time has gone on, there's several contributing factors. One, the fact that we have more and more bad art than ever that doesn't even, elicit a response, elicit any kind of cerebral engagement in the viewer, as they're watching the film. We just get, bombarded with high, energy, high action, scenes of, bloodshed, war, sex, all this stuff that just, overwhelms our senses and doesn't encourage any kind of contemplation whatsoever. It's just action, action, action. And then when you combine that with the fact that with, digital, filmmaking, we're able to, create scenes and create images that you couldn't experience in real life. You couldn't experience these things at the speed with which, these digital filmmakers can create them. And so it kind of, your brain cannot keep up with that like we could with, old film movies or even, a theatrical performance. And so you're basically, when you're, I feel like that the modern, films that we see are encouraging more of a passive engagement with this kind of media. And now we become, passive consumers rather than engaged spectators of artwork. And what does that do to us? Well, that sets ourselves up for, becoming victims of propaganda in art. Because art can be, made prolific and can get into the hands of anyone. And because we desire to consume more and more media, because we're becoming more and more distracted, this, makes us vulnerable to art that has become politicized, art that has become propagandized. We've lost our ability to contemplate things and contemplate things well. And now what we see, instead of art inviting us to engage and think and contemplate and be immersed in an aesthetic experience, now what we see is that media is being used for subliminal mass mobilization. These subliminal experiences of hyper reality, of the unreal, it's uncanny, of this machine produced world. Now we no longer have an appetite to contemplate this subliminal experience or the sublime experience of beauty, that real, tangible art that still has its aura, the actual instantiation of a painting or a piece of music. We don't even have the appetite for it. And I think this is where it becomes, important to think about the kinds of media that you consume. Again, I'm not saying that it's wrong to watch modern films or that all modern films are political propaganda. But it does raise the question of what kind of consumer of art do I want to be? And actually, let's take it back even further. I don't want to be a consumer of art. I want to be a participant in art. I want to enjoy art. I want to contemplate art. I want art to change me and affect me in, ways that it used to. And I want that contemplation of the beautiful and the good and the true to, cultivate my humanity instead of stripping me of it. And I think this is where I'm coming to my final conclusion. And I think, people ask the question, well, how far is too far? How, where's the line between, using machines to create art versus human, and how much human do you need in the art to make it still art? I don't know where to draw the line. I don't know at what point we went too far. But I think I can safely say, and hopefully, after hearing my thoughts on this, you will agree. I think we can safely say that we've definitely gone too far now. And I think we're going to see more and more a smaller niche of people, maybe we could call them the true artists at heart, who miss that, who don't want to surrender their creativity to a machine. I think this birth of AI generated art, I think we've reached the end. This is the end where ultimately we're giving over every creative, choice. I don't think there's much further we can go to in our surrender of our creativity and the creative process to a machine than AI art. Yes, we have to give it prompts and things like that. But eventually, the amount of prompting that we give the machine is going to be so minimal that, I mean, can we even say, is there even such a thing as people who create AI art? I don't think we can honestly say that I think we're going to have to find new terminology. I don't think there's any such thing as an AI artist. The AI is the one who's, making the thing. Anybody can feed a prompt into a computer program. Anybody with, language capabilities can do that. Is that creating? No. It's almost like, and this not just came to me, it's almost like we're trying to supplant our creator at this point. God is the only one who can create things out of ex nihilo, out of nothing, merely by his own word. And it's almost as if we're trying to supplant God and say we are like God, and we can just merely with our words speak, and then a machine creates. It's this weird, it's almost like we've reached the complete anti-art moment of, if art used to be seen as this sub-creative impulse of us reflecting the creative nature of our God, AI art, this pinnacle of digital art creation, now I think now we can say that God is dead and art has killed him. When Nietzsche first said that, it was science that had, eliminated the need for God, because we had come up with all kinds of natural explanations for, the natural world. Now we can come up with, a replacement for, a creator who speaks the world into its existence ex nihilo. Now we have the machine who can generate and replicate commodities. And now we're left with a world of pornography created by a machine versus a world of the real created by a good and beautiful creator. I don't know about you, but I don't accept that. So what do we do? Well, I don't know about you, but this motivates me to really press into exploring the old ways, the old paths, is more and more. I'm not going to throw away my digital camera. I'm not going to, say digital content creation is bad and inherently evil. It's not by any means. But it does draw me more and more away from, I want to reclaim my creativity from the machine. I want to reclaim that unique gift that I've been given as a being made in the image of God, and exercise my creative impulse. And it's also made me a more conscientious consumer. I take that back. I don't even want to be a consumer. I want to be someone who experiences art. I want to get back in touch with, again, the figure of speech here. I want to get back involved in that cult of art. I want to experience pieces of art. I want to experience the singularities and the auras of pieces of art as they were, meant to be experienced by the creator of the artwork itself. I want to see more paintings in person. I want to hear more live music. And I think reclaiming culture in that way from this, this pornographic media-driven culture, I think it's a very human thing to do, a very beautiful thing to do. So, well, I hope that was interesting to you. And if you have any thoughts on it, I would love to hear it. It's kind of inspiring me to think about, like I said, ways of engaging with art and creating art and coming up with my own ways of resistance. And I'd love to hear how, you feel about this topic in ways that you might think of, resisting this this takeover of the machines. How can we avoid the matrix? How can we avoid the machines taking over our lives? This is the question. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.